Des Grantz Geanz. By this poem men shall know how, when, and from what people the great giants came, who first held England, which was then called Albion, and who first gave it this name. Pay your due now, and I will briefly tell you the whole history of the giants, as I heard it from an old man. After the beginning of the world, 3,970 years, in Greece there was a mighty king, who was very valiant, noble, and just, who held power over all the other kings. A fair and gracious queen he married, to whom he begot 30 daughters. They became very beautiful, as has been said, and together they were raised. The father and mother were tall, so too were the children. I cannot give you their names, for I never heard them named, except for the eldest, who was beautiful and of noble lineage. She was splendid and refined, she who was named Albina. When all were of marriageable age, to mighty kings of great kingship, all their daughters the parents gave, and those great kings they married. Each had a king and became a queen, but because of their sovereign pride, later they gathered together, and together they decided that to no one in any manner would they ever be subjected, but rather each her baron. They were the daughters of a king so bold that to no one had he ever been subject. Therefore they did not wish to be so, nor did they wish to have masters, nor to be under reserved constraint, but every day to be the mistress of her husband and of all that he possessed. To each one this plan was pleasing. If their husbands to their will did not wish to conform, to do all their good pleasure, and all that lay within their power, then among themselves they resolved, and upon their faith they swore, that all at the same time would each kill her disobedient husband, in their chamber and in their arms, while he none the less awaited pleasure. A certain day they chose to carry out what they were bound to do. They all had this intention, except perhaps the youngest. She did not wish to commit this crime against her husband, who she held in esteem. When their discussion was finished, they returned to their lodgings. But the matter they had discussed did not please the youngest at all, for she loved her lord, and he was as her own self. She did not wish that he should die, nor to do harm to her lord. But when together they had spoken of it, she dared not go against what they had decided, for if she had been in disagreement, without hesitation they would have killed her then. So she did well to act thus, and so as quickly as she could she returned to her lodging. When she saw her husband, her distress increased. And when her husband perceived it and saw her so terribly unhappy, he immediately asked, as a friend, the reason for her sadness of the young lady. And the noble lady, who was so fair, at her lord's feet threw herself, and weeping begged for mercy. For her fault she implored his pardon, and she told him of the treachery, how her sisters in great wrong had made her swear to put him to death, though she had no desire for it whatsoever. Then her lord immediately took her in his arms, and with the greatest delight kissed her, more passionately than he had ever done before, and said, "Lady, be at peace, and let this heavy burden leave you." The next morning at daybreak he did not delay long. Toward their suzerain, the king of Greece, immediately both of them set out along the roads. And they went on until they arrived. The king welcomed them warmly, but as soon as they had arrived, alas, his daughters spoke to him of it. The king was utterly horrified at what his daughter told him. Letters and documents he had written, and his daughters he promptly summoned, so that they should hasten to join him. And without delay their husbands, by letters he had gathered them. They obeyed his command, and came to him immediately. And when all were assembled, the king said to them, the deadly treachery that each against her baron with malice had plotted, for this punishment would be inflicted. The ladies were dismayed that they were thus accused of the treachery for which they had been arrested, and for which they would never be pardoned. Yet each with all her strength tried to defend herself by swearing, but it was useless to deny it, for the kings were so angered that they wished to condemn them to death for their malice and their wickedness. Their father, who was in great wrath, set himself to discuss everything, and laid the matter out so fully that no mystery could remain about what they had decided when they had conspired. To their father, who was discerning, each one was guilty of having planned this wickedness, with the sole exception of the youngest, who had told everything to her lord, who from then on held her in great honour. When each was found guilty in this execrable affair, all of them in sorrow were taken from their father and their husbands. By judgment it was decided, because to such high kings they had all been married, they could not be condemned nor put to death. They were then taken to the port. I have never heard it said where it was, though that place was by the sea, and all were led away, then placed in a ship. It was a strong and large galleon, but without rudder and without provisions on board. A dreadful time they endured, but no one pitied them, because of their great wickedness and what they had plotted. The ship was pushed out to sea, the waves made it pitch, from one danger to another here and there, driving it away from the land. Terribly they suffered, and were exiled from the palaces in which they had once been rich queens. Now they were surely nothing more but poor wretches. They did not know what would become of them, whether dead or alive they would escape. These ladies were in great misfortune. Their ship was guided by Lady Fortune. The howling winds drove them across the sea, and the high waves threatened them, but nothing harmed them so much as the hunger that gnawed at them, for they had nothing to eat. Yet the perils of the sea made them weep pitifully, and at last they forgot their hunger. From all sides they were tormented. They came to wish for death. Each one suffered terribly, for on the sea a great wind had risen, which swelled and lifted the waters, and enormous waves were formed. On the crests the ship was tossed, then hurled into the troughs. So much did the vessel roll that the ladies fainted. It made them fall, lie prostrate and tumble. For 3 full nights and days nothing could make them move. All the while they remained thus. During this time the ship was carried by the fierce storm that had arisen, and the winds drove them so far away that from any shore they saw no sign of land. Then at last the tempest ceased. As the book recounts, the weather became mild and calm. The ship had been driven so far that it ran aground on a land which is now called England, but at that time it had no name, for no man dwelt there. When the sea withdrew, the ship stranded on the dry land. The ladies then awoke and raised their heads. They found themselves so near the shore that all of them felt great joy. Soon they left the vessel in which they had stayed 3 weeks. But the sister, who was the eldest, hastened ahead of all the others first. She leapt swiftly onto the land and quickly seized a clod of earth. She, who was called Albina, took possession of the land. The others jumped overboard, but they were weak outside the galley. Because of the pain and hardships which they had suffered all along, each one lay on the ground on her back, and great hunger seized them again, though they had forgotten their torments while the storm had raged so terribly. So great was their hunger that they thought of nothing except finding something to eat. Yet they did not know where to search, and in their dire need they ate good herbs. They took large plants and gathered fruits from the trees. Acorns, chestnuts, and other fruits sustained them, and thorny brambles and medlars, berries from the hedges, and clover.